on the topic of Web3 and beyond today, reshaping our economy's future. And before I begin, I'd love to introduce my awesome panelists over here.
First of all, I just want to echo your statement. It's wonderful to see even though it's early morning and the traffic here is quite something to experience. The house is full. My name is Nadja Bester. I'm the co-founder of AdLunam. AdLunam is a Web3 investment ecosystem. Now, before I get into a little bit more about what that is, just my own journey, I've worked in the marketing space for about almost 20 years now. It sounds almost impossible to say when I think about it. And I've really seen the evolution in the marketing space from what was then digital marketing to today, all marketing is digital. And so Web3, I think, will follow a similar progression over the next decade plus, where conversations we are having today, 10 years from now, will be a lot more commonplace. My own journey in this industry started around 2017. I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. I was an executive marketing position for a pharmaceutical company and decided to take a career sabbatical, heard about blockchain, cryptocurrencies, all of these terms, and became a journalist. And so really researched it from a very objective perspective. And then went on to once again work in the marketing industry in Web3 and currently, as I said, co-founder at AdLunam, where we connect early stage startups in the Web3 space with funding, institutional and retail funding. Happy to be here.
Which is a agency that's really focused on Web3 as well as emerging technologies. My own journey in blockchain and Web3 began in 2019 or thereabouts. So exactly what is Web3? We could turn this term around and, a lot of people are just associating Web3 with what's happening in crypto, but, there's a lot more, there's more to it. And, to really fully understand Web3, we do need to understand the Web 1 to 3 journey. There are several milestones from Web 1 to Web 3. And Web 1, of course, refers to the first iteration of the web, the World Wide Web in its infancy. And I would love to delve into some of the milestones and the impact it has had on the web from Web 1 to Web 3. And we would love for you guys to comment on that. Maybe we could start with Nadja.
This is probably one of the most interesting evolutions that we've seen in our lifetime. If you're old enough to remember your life before the internet or even life before computers or smartphones, that was a completely different universe than the one we now. For someone like me, coming to a foreign country, having to navigate, booking hotels, booking flights, booking transport, this has become something that we rely on when it comes to technology. But it's hard to imagine that there was not too long ago a time when this really didn't exist as an option. I don't consider myself too old, and yet I almost feel most of my life has been pre-technology, at least the formative years have. So now if you then look at the internet, the Web 1.0, the static version of the internet, it largely was handing over of information. Whereas before you had to rely on libraries, you had to go out, rain or sunshine, hope that the book is in the library. Suddenly there is information available on the internet. But it's quite limiting what you're able to do with it. Web 2.0 is when the social media explosion happened. So now you have all these platforms, suddenly you're able to stay in touch with friends in asynchronous real time. They post updates, you know what they're doing with their lives, where they are. However, at the same time, all of this data that's being generated is owned by platforms such as Facebook, where we are actually uploading this data to. And now we are at the doorstep of Web3/Web 3.0. So Web 3.0 kind of evoking the semantic internet, where machines start talking like humans, where they understand like humans. So in ChatGPT, we see that this is quite, in a very real way, happening in this moment. I wonder how many people in this room might even be using ChatGPT for something in this very second as I'm speaking. So it's becoming an everyday part of our lives. And then we have Web3, which is really what we'll be talking about today, the decentralized aspect of what the internet is and where it's going. Going to hand over to my other panelists to talk more about Web3 especially.
Thank you for a very nice overview. Definitely, blockchains has blockchain currencies have definitely contributed more, I would say, into Amazon. How much more they're kind of missing in terms of like flat economy, perhaps? And you want to speak a little bit about that?
I think when we look at awareness and then adoption, obviously topics that we need to be discussing, as much as we sitting here on a stage and we have an audience in front of us, and these are terms that likely are somewhat, if not very familiar to all of us. There are people out there in the world who have no idea what we're talking about. There are people who've never heard the word blockchain, to whom cryptocurrency is nothing more than a scam, and Web3 is absolutely meaningless. So I always think about it, these questions. I'm not sure this is still working. That would be great. When this one always comes out. As much as we can come together today and talk about the use cases and about why all of this is important, ultimately it is still a spectrum. So when we think about the impact that these technologies have had, it absolutely depends on who you're speaking to. I was thinking to myself earlier as I was listening to Bogdan talk about the experiences that he has developing for governments. Now, I have been on the other end of the table where, as a marketing person working on these projects with governments, we are not there yet. So the implementation, for example, might look very different from the development. And I think this is similarly, if you look at the impact that these technologies have had, depending on the country, for instance. I think Chad made a really good point about cross-border payments, because that certainly is in my own life. Whenever I do need to do an international fiat transfer, I'm struck by how just archaic the process is. I mean, you wait a week, you have to have a phone call with someone. It's something that doesn't really fit into the modern day lifestyle anymore. If I make a cryptocurrency transfer, I do it in less than a minute, and the money shows up anywhere else in the world. So for me, as a busy business person that doesn't have the time to get bogged down by your bureaucratic processes that are outdated, that's a daily use case for cryptocurrency. If we talk about blockchain technology, the enterprise blockchain technologists, let's say, will have a very different view of blockchain technology than someone that is building a Web3 native decentralized product for other people that are exclusively using decentralized products. So I think there's a spectrum of people, there's a spectrum of use cases. And so if you find yourself speaking to someone where their implementation of the technology or their understanding or their philosophical outlook of the technology differs from yours, I think that it's very important to point out that there really is so much of a scope that this technology has, that really every pocket of people that you speak to might have a very different understanding. However, there's so much room to implement the technology, whatever the industry, whatever the use case, and whatever the motivation.
Like what kinds of challenges do these decentralized economies, especially in enterprises, what kind of challenges are there when we're talking about decentralized economies, and how can they be effective, more effective, in terms of how they're being implemented and how operationally they can, like across industries and maybe, I don't know, not sure, maybe you want to start off giving me insights, based on your industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have the perfect life example for this. As I mentioned, I introduced myself, so I worked in what was then called digital marketing, and then transitioned from having an agency where clients were allowing us to push boundaries into the pharmaceutical corporate environment, where even though it was still breaking boundaries with marketing, it was very much within the boundaries of very strict regulations. And so I think similarly, if you talk about the adoption of decentralized technologies and all of the other aspects to Web3 in an enterprise environment, that really means that it's going to come up against the very nature of that which it's been designed to provide an alternative against. So an enterprise environment by default is very centralized, and so here's this technology that is all for decentralization. So certainly it feels as though there is a philosophical clash, and arguably there might be, depending on the industry in question, depending on the company in question. I think if we look at what the benefits are of decentralized technologies, the fact that it is transparent, it's a very, very big and important keyword, and it might be that there are enterprises that feel not really what they are going for, and there are others for whom it might be the perfect solution. But this is also something that has to be extended to the industry itself. So I've worked with a number of different supply chain projects where the startup might have an innovative solution to a supply chain issue, but some of the other stakeholders within this chain, not everyone wants all of the data to be on the blockchain, immutable, without question. So I think what is perhaps a bigger challenge, not only the typical enterprise challenges of change management and adoption of new practices, which always takes a lot of time. I mean, corporate enterprise is a slow-moving machine, aka dinosaur, depending on where you stand. But on the other hand, the industries themselves also need to shift and continue to shift. We saw this recently with the entertainment industry when Hollywood went on strike because ChatGPT exists. So similarly, industries really perhaps would need to come to a point where they say, listen, now there's no excuse not to use blockchain technology for these practices. For it to become widely adopted over the next, I think, decade or so, but I think ultimately it will win out if it's more logical to use a technology that addresses certain issues that cannot be solved any other way. That is the best use case for something like blockchain technology.
Give us some
of developers. I would like to have a concrete example of phasing through crypto blockchain, let's say 1 million in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is a place where there is a very liquid market. And can you eventually answer just this simple question of how to set up this 1 million startup blockchain crypto token mini fund? Thank you.
Okay, so you're basically talking about fundraising, right? How to?
Yes, would be fundraising or another labeling of the business, but a practical aspect of what you are presenting, because you are expert here. You are 4 people, one better than the other one, and so I would like only just an example, a case study. How would you do it?
Just add something. I think where the market is also extremely important. So whenever there's a bull market where Bitcoin price is extremely high and all of the altcoins, the prices keep on shooting up, people invest in pretty much everything if they think it's going to give them quick gains. Hopefully with this learning that we've had over the last 2 years, things will be different. But then hope springs eternal. I think we know what human nature is like. However, institutional investors, they very closely follow the market. So first of all, ensure that there is genuine utility to what it is that you are building. If you are the only person who sees the utility, probably you are very early, or usually when others can't see it, you're too early. On the other hand, it's also extremely important to understand that just because you're not getting that investment at a particular point in time, it doesn't mean you might not get it in future. However, it might mean that you would need to pivot. So what you are offering right now is perhaps not speaking to the market as much as the market needs to be spoken to in that time, in that way. But the idea itself, can be fluid enough where you are able to have it tailored to the market. So I think it's always a very delicate dance between the innovation from the founder and then, of course, the market appetite, especially from an institutional investment perspective. Yeah, what's next? I think Web3 is one piece of a very big and very interesting puzzle. Because I think we are standing on the precipice of just extreme societal change when it comes to technology. And I always feel like maybe I'm being a little bit dramatic, because then I speak to someone who doesn't work in technology and they don't have the same insights I do, which means they don't necessarily share the same insights. However, I think it's palpable because people are sharing the sentiment, even if they don't have maybe such a nuanced understanding. So I think we are at a time where technology is absolutely going to revolutionize the way that we interact with the world. And this is everything from business and finance, but really also just how we perceive the world. Because now with AI we have deep fakes, for example, so we don't even know if anything that we are reading or seeing in the news is true anymore. So is there a use case for Web3 that applies to everyone? I think the more that we see AI come into its own, the more we are going to see blockchain for provenance. This is absolutely inevitable. It's not going to be because it's driven by a fad. Much of Web3 at times is driven by a fad. I think NFTs was a great example. During COVID, everyone stayed home. Summer of 2021, NFT shot up as if it was the next best thing that was going to save the world. That has died down. However, the NFTs as a technology has not died down. So now if you look at some of the biggest brands in the world, they are using NFTs for marketing, for loyalty programs. So I think, really just to then go along the same lines of Web 2.5, I don't think we are going to see this very stark transition from 1 to 2 to 3, because in actuality it didn't happen with the others as well. It's a gradual change. And so will there be a time when the world is Web3ified, when we all live in the metaverse? I think this is something that really no one can answer, because the conceptualization